Morning, we'll bring the meeting to order. We have several presentations tomorrow night. C1 is a consent approval of the minutes. C2 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Clark Powell Associates Incorporated of Winston-Salem in the amount of up to $134,820 in ARPA funds for upgrades to the audiovisual and broadcasting systems technology in city council chambers. C3 is a resolution declaring the list of vehicles and equipment as surplus property to be sold at electronic auction on govdeals.com. PH1 is an ordinance amending the official zoning map of the city to rezone property containing 2.88 acres of land located at 928, 1121, and 1125 Montclair Avenue from R10 medium density single dwelling district to R5 CD medium density mixed residential conditional district for a 10-lot single dwelling residential subdivision. Yes, sir, Mr. Runbar.
Who would?
Brian.
I heard
Brian
you, Tony.
Chambers.
I heard you.
Thank you. I'm glad you did.
Brian, in going
Yes,
over
sir.
this, I didn't notice that there was a request for the accessory dwellings in the rear of the properties. Is that your take on it? Is that the way they left?
Yeah, there was no condition that restricted the ADUs on these lots.
Okay, but was that mentioned in their pitch that that's what they want to do?
They would like to leave it open to have the option to have ADUs.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
PH2 is an ordinance directing the Chief Code Enforcement Officer to vacate, close, and repair the non-residential structure at 5039 Wrightsville Avenue as a health and safety hazard pursuant to Article 7, Chapter 16 of the City Code, and directing that a notice be placed thereon prohibiting its use or occupancy. And then PH3 is an ordinance directing the Chief Code Enforcement Officer to vacate, close, and repair or demolish the non-residential structure at 827 Greenfield Street as a health and safety hazard pursuant to Article 7, Chapter 16 of the Wilmington City Code, and directing that a notice be placed thereon prohibiting its use or occupancy. Then ordinances, 01 is an ordinance making supplemental appropriation in the amount of $12,388 for the rental of a synthetic ice ring from Artificial Ice LLC of Massachusetts for holiday programming at Riverfront Park. And then 02 is an ordinance making a supplemental appropriation in the amount of $20,000 to the Public Improvements Capital Project Fund for a North Carolina Volkswagen Settlement Program grant awarded by the North Carolina Division of Air Quality. 03 is an ordinance appropriating an additional $28,175 for a Riverwalk Extension feasibility study funded by a $10,000 property owner contribution and an $18,175 from the council contingency fund. And then 04 is an ordinance making supplemental appropriation in the amount of $17,827.44 to the general fund for security guard services primarily at the 305 Chestnut Street Municipal Building through a Cape Fear Utility Authority interlocal agreement approved by City Council on November the 15th, 2022. 05 is an ordinance amending the Chapter 8, Article 1, Section 8 through 5 of the Wilmington City Code as it relates to criminal background checks for certain applicants for city employment. And the resolutions are: one is a resolution approving amendments to City Policy 105, Americans with Disabilities Act, City Policy 226, Family and Medical Leave, and City Policy 229, Leave Without Pay. Then R2A is a resolution to reject all proposals received on October the 20th, 2022 for comprehensive parking management services. And then R2B is a resolution authorizing amendment number 11 to the city's comprehensive parking services contract for a 5-month contract extension to Lanier Parking Meter Services, LLC. Then R3 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to exercise the first contract extension of the annual Needs Streets Rehabilitation Program with Highland Paving Company, LLC of Fayetteville, North Carolina, and to increase the contract amount by $5 million. And then R4 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to amend the venue management agreement for Live Oak Bank Pavilion and Riverfront Park between the City of Wilmington and Live Nation Worldwide, Incorporated. And this concludes.
Mayor,
yes, sir.
I'd like to, if I could, go back to PH2
Yes, sir.
and ask Brian a question. Brian, on this former service station lot, to your knowledge, are there any tanks still in the ground there of any kind?
No, the owner has removed the underground storage tanks.
Okay, because I know that was always a sticking point. Nobody wanted to take ownership because of the liability. So if that's done, that's a good thing.
Correct, they removed that, I want to say in early 2020.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Carter? Anything else?
Morning, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. We have one item to follow the agenda briefing this morning. We're going to receive an update on the Greater Downtown Plan. It will be provided by Nicole Smith, who's a senior planner with the department.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to provide a brief status update on the Greater Downtown Planning Initiative. This project was initially pitched as an update to the current Wilmington Vision 2020 plan adopted by Council in 2004. While the previous planning area was limited to the area between the Cape Fear Memorial and Isabel Holmes bridges, this endeavor has grown to accommodate the entire 1945 corporate limits, including the 18 distinct neighborhoods shown on your screen. The new planning boundary will not only update the Wilmington Vision 2020 small area plan, but also the North Side Community Plan adopted in 2003 and the South Side Small Area Plan adopted in 2009. Council lent support to this initiative in the most recent budget adoption, committing $350,000 over the next 3 fiscal years. At the time of Council's initial support, the desirable outcomes of this project included identification of economic development opportunities, infill and redevelopment strategies, land use policies, and capital project investments to ensure the city's core will continue to thrive for the next 20 years. The first step in staff's approach was to analyze the growth the planning area and the city in general has experienced since the last plan. A few of the statistics outlining the growth of the city as a whole are available on your screen. Comparatively, the growth the 1945 corporate limits has experienced has occurred at a slower rate, including an estimated population increase of 0.1% and an average household increase of 9.4% based on the available 2020 census data. Additionally, the gap in the owner-occupied versus renter-occupied units has continued to grow. An estimated 26.6% increase has occurred in renter-occupied housing units across the city, 21.8% within the planning area. Best practices include acknowledging who you are planning for when undertaking a specialized area plan to ensure the recommendations are realistic, obtainable, and compatible with the community's vision. On your screen is the population change by race experienced within the 1945 corporate limits. The gray numbers are representative of the 2000 data collection, the blue representative of the 2020 census data collection. Staff has provided a percentage increase snapshot to indicate the shifts in the racial makeup of the planning area. Similarly, this slide illustrates the shift in population by age within the 1945 corporate limits. The percentages highlight noteworthy shifts, including an influx of baby boomers moving into the 1945 corporate limits, the flight of Gen Xers from the corporate limits, and the decline of children under the age of 4 residing in the city's core. Staff further reviewed adopted plans and identified potential resources and materials to cross-reference to ensure the recommendations that evolve from this effort acknowledge existing tools. This figure is from the recently adopted Cape Fear Moving Forward 2045 plan, adopted in November of 2020. It provides insights to households with no vehicles across the region. Note the darkest shade of purple is indicative of 15.1% or more of households without a vehicle based on the 2015 census populations. So we're looking, our planning area would be in this vicinity. It is evident that the planning area represents a large portion of the city's population that do not have access to a vehicle. Staff's analysis also includes plans in draft form. On your screen is a map from the Walk Wilmington draft update. This map shows the areas of greatest disadvantage that are centered around the downtown core. This map is also taken from the Cape Fear Moving Forward 2045 plan. It illustrates the median household income for the region. The lighter shades are indicative of lower income households. While the planning area represents a variety of households, the trend is indicative of a lower average median income, again in our planning area. Another map of the Cape Fear Moving Forward 2045 plan illustrating the number of employment opportunities per square mile. The darker shades represent increased employment opportunities. The planning area shading indicates increased employment opportunities exist within the planning area vicinity. Given the grand scope and diverse strengths and challenges of the downtown neighborhoods within the planning area, staff has approached this planning process in a unique manner. That included engaging the community in advance of identifying our consultant. The goals of the pre-engagement efforts were to share the upcoming initiative, outline the community strengths and challenges, and identify who needs to be part of the consulting partnership. This slide summarizes some of the things our citizens love about the 1945 corporate limits. Culture ranked number 1 among the 156 responses received. Bicycle and pedestrian facilities came in second place. Parks and free parking opportunities were among common themes. The other category represents a variety of interests, including business variety, proximity to the river, aesthetics, and special events. This slide summarizes some of the concepts our great city stands to improve upon. Common themes include safety, bicycle and pedestrian facilities, affordable housing, culture, rectifying the food desert, and other items that are not as easily categorized. Examples of these other items include estate planning assistance, youth programming, public water access, racism, drug abuse, and homelessness. To summarize the input gained to date, the city, and specifically the planning area, is continuing to experience growth. The proposed planning initiative presents an opportunity to proactively address current shortcomings, including alternative transportation options, affordable housing, art and culture, and social issues. It also allows the community to share their stories and their experiences and celebrate what makes our community unique. The pre-engagement phase of our project has ended. We are preparing to fine-tune our RFQ with purchasing and hope to release by the end of the month. Upon receipt of submittals, staff will shortlist potential partners and invite preferred consultants to give presentations to council, with a goal of partner selection in April. That concludes staff's presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Do you have any questions from council? Sir.
I want you to go back to the opportunity and prosperity slide.
I think there's two under that heading. I have the median household income, and then I have employment per square mile. Is there one specific?
Median household income.
Median household? Yes, sir.
There's no way we can't zoom in on this, can we?
I plan on finessing and providing council with a report that would have this map in it that'll zoom in on the area.
Okay.
It's interesting that all of the 2020 census data hasn't necessarily been released, so we're using 2015 projections in this map, but we'll be providing a follow-up to council that would include this map and a zoom in of the area.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Sure.
Going back, it was like your first slide at opening, it was just kind of, I don't know, just felt myself shaking my head about you had like 26 or something, for some huge percent of more renters downtown. but the population of downtown had not increased at all. I mean, like, what were those numbers?
Yeah,
They didn't seem to go together.
I would agree. I think that the 2020 census collection is in a unique position in that we were collecting data in the midst of a pandemic. And anytime you are reducing sample size, you're increasing your margin of error. So I think jurisdictions across the state are experiencing this same concern and are filing procedures to correct data. But to clarify, the 26.6 that's shown on your screen is actually the citywide statistic.
Yeah, but you said the downtown statistic was in the 20s
It
too.
is. The downtown is growing at a little bit less of a rate. 21.3% is the renter-occupied housing unit
And
status.
the census number was what, 0.1 or something?
In comparison to the overall population growth of 0.1%, which, if I may, is not really consistent with the permitting that's going through our office locally. So,
I wouldn't think. And all the multifamily downtown. Okay, thank you.
yes, sir.
Nicole, wouldn't that be the fact that the permitting process we're going is based on present time, whereas these numbers are projections from 2015? So there'd be a little delta there in and of itself, wouldn't it?
So the numbers on your screen are a result of the 2020 census data. And again, we're experiencing some higher errors of margin, based on the sampling size, because we did collect our data during the pandemic.
Thank you, ma'am.
Question. When you did like the pie graphs, were those categories listed or did they write them in? You understand what I'm asking?
On the information received from our citizens?
Right. Like, for example, the one with regional collaboration. Did they have a list that said affordable housing, bike path, safety, da-da-da?
They did not. So we actually started with blank sheets of paper, as shown on these screens, and asked, what do you love about your community and what would you change about your community? And then the citizens went to town with their recommendations.
That's good. All right, thank you.
Yes, sir? Yes, ma'am.
So, can we go back to the census, because this has been, I think, a concern of at least mine. I know that during the pandemic, in fact, the Department of Commerce had reached out to us in respect that they didn't think that we were tabulating the information properly, or not enough of it, because it's showing a population in 2020 of 117,000. We were always told about 5 years out, it was about 120 to 123,000, correct? And then yet you got building permits that are shooting through the roof, and yet it's showing a decrease in population from 120, 123 to 117. It just doesn't jive. And I know that I mentioned it to Kara Spencer to see about what we could do to amend this, but I understand that it's a pretty elaborate process at best. But do you know any other cities that are doing this within the state that you mentioned?
There
about
are
that?
some cities that are taking a chance and filing corrections, but as you indicated, the process is very cumbersome, so we're not hearing a lot of the outcomes at this point with the efforts that have been filed to date. It's something that we can certainly follow and share.
Well, I guess in the planning process, you folks know what the permits are, but it's not relating to what the actual population counts are. We got apartments sprouting everywhere, and yet you're showing a decrease in population from the last census numbers. It just
Doesn't add up.
It's not adding up at all, and I think it overall it could possibly hurt us in regards to some grant opportunities and other things that we as cities apply for. Tony?
I think there's two things to remember here. First of all, the anecdotal, we see the permits, but we also don't see the number of outflow that leave the city to go to the suburban areas that surround it. The second thing is, remember that the census numbers that we were given in 2019 were projections based upon the previous 10 years growth models. So we slowed down potentially in growth from 2010 to 2020 as opposed to when it was going from 2000 to 2010. So the projection model just didn't pan out. We certainly can pursue that. It is a very cumbersome, time-consuming, and expensive process, but we could do that if that's what council would like to see.
Well, I guess my bigger, I think you can do it in-house. You can determine how many permits have been issued.
Yes, sir.
And you can kind of get a pretty good indication of what your population should be based on our own internal models. But I think that this last count, especially with COVID, and as tough as that situation was to try to count people, I think we're undercounting our population. But I think we can do it internally because we're going to have to wait another 10 years before we get a real correction here, or at least another 5 years for some modeling that would take place. But the numbers are not jiving at all.
Yes, sir.
It's a topic we could certainly broach with our consulting partners as well. I'm sure it's a conversation that's being held in multiple jurisdictions across the nation.
Well, Nicole, I would just ask staff and ask the city manager, if you can tabulate all the permits, it's going to give you an indication of what the population increases should be. I mean, you got a university that's going, I don't even know if we're getting those proper counts in. You've got, apartments being built everywhere. We're hearing it all over, and more coming. And yet we're showing a decrease in population. It's not adding up at all. And I'd just like to see if we can figure this out. Even if we have to do it internally, you got a great GIS system in which you can pretty much dictate, or you can hit it on a map and it can tell you how many permits have been issued in this particular quadrant or in that particular neighborhood. And we're not getting that information properly, at least not from the federal side.
Because if there were outflows, I mean, I'm sure there are, but if they were massive, we wouldn't have these apartments filling up when they're built. I mean, it's not like, I don't know what our occupancy rate is, but the last I heard it was pretty tight on rental, on apartments and rentals. So it's not hard to believe. It's just not correct. I don't know how we capture it. Whatever effort we can do without spending a fortune would be well worth it, I think. Thank you.
Nicole, the other question is in respect to the plan. I know this is kind of, we're changing the name of it. It's going from the Vision 2020 plan to the Greater Wilmington plan. The meetings that you've had in the locations that you have shown us, do you know how many people in total participated in this? Do you have a number?
Sure. So data is a little different. We received 156 responses when asked what you love about your community, and then 302 comments about what you would like to change about your community. And then we have identified 50 citizens that would like to be informed via email as this initiative continues to progress.
Do you think that sampling is large enough, or do you think we should have a larger sampling than just 300? Well, 156, I think, was the number that you'd thrown out at.
Right. So 302 responses were received on the Change It. People always want to talk about things that they want to change rather than the things that they love, but 156 respondents responded to the love it, and then again, 50 have asked to keep them informed moving forward.
Yes, sir.
Was this how did they collect this data? Was this phone calls?
No, we actually attended
These meetings,
events.
they're all at these meetings?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Because I don't know, I guess we've got a lot of consulting going on. I got a phone call that if it was this one, I wanted to comment, but this was done in person.
Sure. Staff identified 6 events that were representing different neighborhoods in the community and attended those events. We also had a website, but we did not receive a lot of input through the website. But as the planning initiative rolls farther into the process, there will be additional opportunities. We use this as an opportunity to identify some of the themes that we were hearing and an opportunity to identify who needs to be part of the consulting partnerships.
All right, Nicole. Yeah, go ahead.
breakdown of how many comments were received per location? I mean, were they heavily skewed in different locations, or did we kind of receive an even number?
I don't have that included in the presentation, but that's something I can add to the report that we're going to follow up, because we did track where the comments came from, not necessarily geography-wise, but which event the comment came from. And the number of people that had those comments, yes.
Yeah, I was looking at the number of persons that you based on race and things, and I noticed that for African Americans, we're down 23%. The only group that's, I guess, in the negative. Is that a red flag? Is there something we need to think about? Or does that tell us anything?
So we'll get into more of the trends that we're experiencing when we're diving deeper into the planning process. The intent with this slide is just to identify who we're planning for with this initiative. But we'll dive deeper into the trends and the shifts in population as part of the planning effort.
Okay, I hope so.
To the mayor's point, we're operating, this is based on census data, right? But we're operating on inaccurate data. These numbers could be completely wrong, right? These percentages could be completely off.
There is a higher margin of error based on the sample of the population that participated in the 2020 census.
Because we didn't have enough people participating in the 2020 census. But I mean, that's the same number that we use, though, for everything else, right? We'll use that 2020 census number.
We can also take a look as we're being directed at local data and see where there are differences, and we can pursue further evaluation through that aspect.
So is this that from 2015 or from 2020?
So the difference, the percentages are from 2010 to 2020 census data. The gray is going to be the 2010 census data, the blue being the 2020.
Right. And you also said this is an indication of who we're planning for?
That was the intent, yes, sir.
So who's here and who's not here? So does this mean that we're planning less for black people since the 23.3% have left our community?
This is specific, it's a snapshot of the 1945 corporate limit, so we're trying to understand the trends that are occurring from the last planning initiative. So I don't think that the racial component is necessarily leaving the community, but maybe leaving the 1945 district and moving to another part of the city or county. But we won't know until we dive deeper into the statistics.
I would love to see that. I would love to see that they left the 1945 incorporated parts and moved to other places. I seriously doubt it.
Yes, sir.
But I'd love to see if that's happening.
I don't have that data for you today, but it's certainly something we'll investigate.
I'm waiting for you to have it, so whenever you get it, I'll be excited to see that.
Yes, sir.
Nicole, I guess this would also go to Ms. Painter in respect to the policy and the creating the plan. How much do y'all depend on data to create any of these plans in respect to growth rates? I know we can track traffic data pretty easily for the North Carolina Department of Transportation, or when the developer does a TIA, we can track that data. But on population data, permit data, how well do we do there based on the service delivery that the city would have to provide in that specific area, as well as the number of units that may be needed, or how many units are rental as opposed to single family owned? I mean, I think that's important data for you as a planner to determine, public policy that would come back to the city council in respect to making investments in stormwater, roads. Maybe we need more affordable housing in a particular area, or support of rental assistance or rental rehab to keep some properties in the rental program, if a owner wants to keep it there. But how much are y'all tabulating in regards to data using our GIS? Because I've used GIS with the city. I've asked for specific information to snap on it as to how far maybe a grocery store is from any population base. Are y'all leaning on that a lot, or where are you determining the data from? Where are you getting it from?
Sure, and that's a valid point. The census is one tool in our data, or one data set in our toolbox. So we also have the ability to take a look at local data. We can take a look at our permitting statistics. We can walk the area and do windshield surveys, if you will, identifying the trends that we're experiencing on the ground. Since we are present in this community, we tend to have a more zoomed in understanding of what's actually occurring. So I don't want you to get too caught up in the census data relative to this special planning effort, because it will provide more of a baseline than we're not going to necessarily make all of our recommendations based on this data collection point. We have the ability to internalize some data.
And I also don't want us to give the impression that that is not correct, because we'll get a lot of phone calls and a lot of emails ripping us all apart saying we're giving out false information. And you know we will receive those phone calls and emails. So, I mean,
And we can
I
utilize
believe-
the margin of error to explain, and we can cite the data source, because this is a valid data source, and it should be a consideration, but it doesn't have to be the sole consideration. We can justify our recommendations and our projections through other means.
well, yeah, that's essential for you to say, because we don't want people to think that you
Yes, sir.
made a presentation to us and this was some skewed information
Yes, sir.
from unlikely sources.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Nicole.
That's all we have for you this morning, Mr. Mayor.
Merry Christmas. Thank you.
Merry Christmas to you.
Okay, appreciate it. Okay. Then I'll see everybody tomorrow night. With that, we stand adjourned.
All right.